Hey friends, this is Marilyn from Tarot Clarity. This is a continuation of the Rosenwald comparison of 3 different Rosenwald decks that I have. Now, I started out with a comparison of 4 because I had the Kristen Condor Rosenwald, but she had only done the Triumph cards. So now we're just continuing with the other 3 decks that I have. The Robby Fowler, which is now available through a Kickstarter campaign. The campaign just began on November 10th. It runs until December 13th, and you get in on it. And then thereafter, the decks will be available, I believe, for $40. The other deck that I'm comparing it with, the other Rosenwald I'm comparing it with, is the Tarot Sheet Revival by Sullivan Hissmans, and then I have one by Marco Benedetti. Oh, I have 2 by Marco Benedetti, but I'm only showing one because one was from the Game Crafter days, so I'm going to show this other one. Now, I believe Sullivan Hissman and Marco Benedetti both have other Rosenwalds that they've published, but these are just the copies that I happen to have of their decks. So we'll begin with the Suit of Swords. I'll flip the camera, we'll get started. So I won't get into all the anomalies of the Rosenwald or anything like that because I've discussed it in other videos, and I've done a lot of Rosenwald videos, and then I did, etc. So I'm not going to get into all that. But I will say that since I have a printer's copy of this particular deck, I want to point out that the blacks will be blacker. This is just a printer's copy, and the blacks are not as black as they will be. And the tan background, Robby has told me that it will be more warm. So we see with the, and then with the Sullivan Hissmans, it seems as though this was an effort made to make it look authentic, or it could have been, an authentic facsimile. I'm not really sure. And then Marco decided to add color to his. And you'll notice in some cases that they are a reversal of one another, and that is due to the fact that there are 2 extant copies of the Rosenwald, one in the National Gallery in Washington, D.C., and one in Germany. So it all depends on the copy that the particular publisher chose. But we see in this particular copy, in this particular card, how, a beautiful articulation, right? It's a beautiful artistry. But some of the cards seem like they are a little clunky or chunky, or the artwork doesn't seem as though it's as sophisticated. And that is what has led many people, and myself included, to suspect that the decks that we have that we call the Rosenwald were really part and parcel of two decks. And Robby Fowler with Rosenwald Redux ascertains that perhaps the Rosenwald was really part of a Minchiati deck, because there are features about it that really lend themselves to believe that it could have been part of a Minchiati. And so I'll be doing, above and beyond the comparison to my Rosenwalds, I'll be comparing some of the, feature cards of the Rosenwald Redux to other Minchiati decks. Well, maybe one. I'll just pick one. So we're not, but I think it's a pretty interesting premise. I think it's pretty cool. So here we have. So the center one seems to be more like in keeping with what a facsimile of an aged deck, 500, 600 years old, would look like. Marco's would be perhaps ideally with color. And then the Redux deck by Robby Fowler is more in keeping with what it is, right? Now remember, the blacks will be blacker and the tan background will be different. So if it seems like it's not dark enough, that will be adjusted. I just have a printer's copy, but I'm really looking forward to seeing the final copy. The quality, the cardstock of each of these cards. This is the copy that I have. The printer's copy is a linen finish, and I believe it will be 310 GSM. with linen finish. Let me, oh, sorry about that. Let me see, what did he say? Was it 310? Yes, 310 GSM Casino linen finish. So it'll be a deck that'll last forever. This one that I have from Sullivan Hismans and Marco's, they're both about the same. They feel like a, quality cardboard, a type of cardboard. Not like artisanal paper, but more like cardboard. That doesn't mean it's not quality board. I'm just saying it just feels like cardboard. Okay, so here we have 3 swords of each. And Marco's and the Rosenwald Tarot are just about exactly the same size, in keeping with the exact size of the actual Rosenwald. The Redux was done in the, what did he call it? Bridge size. Okay, so here's a comparison. Same height, different width. So the Rosenwald Redux is a bit wider, but it's, on modern sized, cardstock, which helps keep the price down, right? Keeps the price down. And it's still a very intimate size, as the Rosenwald is. It's a very intimate little size. Okay, I made a mistake here. Here we go. I'm going to take these piles away because they're going to start getting pretty tall. And then I'm going to start making silly mistakes. So, okay, we have the 6. I'm just going to do like this. It'll be easier for me. And bear in mind, again, that the blacks will be blacker on this particular deck. It's worth noting, however, that we have the same anomaly on the center of this sword in the Sullivan Hismans. So that must have been the way it appeared. With Marco's, because he chose to give it color, we don't have that anomaly where like the blade itself is, it looks like an effort to make the blade look 3-dimensional was. And if this hadn't been filled in, we would have still had that, that empty space. So we have a little bit of breathing room because the decision was made to put it on bridge cardstock, right? Bridge size cardstock. So there's a little bit of breathing room there. We don't have in the actual size, cards. It looks like Robby may have made, a little bit of an effort to, make them a little bit more uniform. I'm not sure. These facsimile decks or these other copies look like they might be a little on the wonky side, right? If we compare, let's say, how, right, we see that little inconsistency, which I'm sure was probably on the actual deck, and we don't see it in this one, reversed or otherwise. So Robby may have made like, a decision to make the swords a little bit more uniform. And because all the 10s of every deck were missing, they each had to come up with their own 10. So Marco chose to put the two which is, we see a lot of twos. Like sometimes we see it one going this way and one going that way. Sometimes we see it like this. And Marco's extra blades are behind this band, I guess, here. Sullivan Hissman's from Tarot Sheet Revival chose to just have two groups of 5. And then here we have the diagonal 2 addition, but they're above, in front of the bands. We have our page. And I never noticed before, how the leg is here, the line going down the center of the pant. It's just kind of strange. Really sharp crease. He's got a little sad face, this guy. Now we see with the with some of the court cards, we see like a certain amount of gentility and the fineness of line. We saw it in the Ace of Swords too. And then we'll get into some of the other cards, the court cards, where there's like more crudeness. So it almost, it definitely seems apparent that there was more than one person's hand involved in either this one deck or just two distinct decks that just got mishmashed together in random book binding or book filler. Now, I think Sullivan Hissman, what he has done is he has given us two versions, because I think he, recognized that there was probably two different hands. There's one that's a little more genteel, but I believe this is Sullivan Hissman's contribution. But the way she actually appears in the book filling. Despite the gentility of, that, I prefer to use the way she actually came to us, whether she was from two distinct decks or not. I just kind of like how something survives 500 years. The way it survives, the way it survives is, look what I've done. I've put all of them in the same pile. My goodness, what am I thinking? I can at least put that one aside. I'll deal with it later. Never mind. I'm not even going to worry about it. And then we have, so now see that here is like the original king. And the original king, he looks quite more like Sullivan Hissman's restyling of the queen, right? So if this guy, if the artist who did this card had done the queen, she probably would look more like this, as Sullivan Hissman created for us, right? But this is the queen that came in the book filler. So there is a difference in this, in the quality of line. Now, this is a beautiful Ace of Cups, just lovely. With or without color. Very pretty. I like how in these two, it goes beyond the border. It breaks what's it say when an actor breaks what's that dimension that they break? I like how that happens in those two decks. We have our two. And remember, the black lines will be more prominent in the final, in the copy that you'll get with the Kickstarter. And I think it'll probably make it less seem like those are just dots, or that the cap is floating apart from the body of the cup. So I think that will be a desirable consequence of having it be darker black, right? Well, those lines will be a little more, apparent. Beautiful. And I think our deck on the left really holds up nicely to the other decks created by the masters, of course. And again, I think we'll notice that the lines being darker will be more prominent, and we won't see this decapitation, Although in some ways I kind of like the way it looks, to be honest. I noticed that the other day when I was showcasing it, and I was like, wow, they look like they're like floating apart from it. But I don't think that was an intended thing. I don't think so. But even here, it's a little on the frail side. It's a little frail, we see the frailty of line. But I think if we see darker lines and they're more prominent, it won't have that effect as much. And then, of course, Marco makes sure that they're attached. And remember, the 10s of every suit had to be recreated, and they all seem to have followed suit, so to speak. Now, my reason for showcasing or comparing when I have more than one deck, I'm going to pull the table, so excuse me for the sound. It's not to, do anything about, to say anything about who I like better or anything like that. Not by a long shot. In fact, I really like to have multiple copies of a deck because I enjoy having decks that I can use with abandon. As this is modern cardstock with a nice linen finish, it'll be, and I could shuffle it with abandon without concern of damaging, an expensive deck. I mean, I believe it'll be for sale after the Kickstarter for $40, So I appreciate a utilitarian deck that really holds up to the artistry of like a facsimile deck, or one that was, created not maybe as a facsimile, but as a restoration. So again, we see how similar they are. This one seems like he's got a little beanie, like a little beanie nib at the top. And then again, oh no, we don't have multiple queens. Okay, because this queen looks like, of the two in the Rosenwald book fillers, this one would have been created by perhaps the more skilled artist. But notice there's differences in the hair. So the top of her head there must have been something missing, right? With this part of her head, because all three give it a different treatment. Marco just gives her hair to the maiden. We have a little, sash around her head here, and then here we have maybe a scarf on her head. Not really sure. Okay, now here we have, in the case of the kings with Sullivan Hissman, we have the crude king. And then we have, or is this the queen? This looks more like a queen. I'm not sure. Huh. Or did I confuse it? Oh, maybe I did. So sorry. Let's see what we have here. Because this one, on the left and this one on the right by Marco, they would have been, okay, so these are the queens that came with the deck. That would have been found in the book filler, all right? As was this one. Okay, as was this one. Now, this one didn't have any stylization on the cup as Marco's and Fowler's did. So these were the queens. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I got myself all confused. So then Fowler just, added like the more genteel looking to match, I guess, the king. That was done by a more genteel artist. That's what I'm thinking. Okay. So I think the queens consistently seem to be the cards that Tarot Sheet Revival recreated, because they seem to be these, the ones that came with the proper deck, that's in the book bindings, may have been like less sophisticated than some of the other court cards as we see here. And again, I think the darkness of line will really improve, how these cards will look. It'll give them more definition for sure. Okay, moving on to the aces. Now the aces, just like with the ace of swords and cups, really like nicely done. So the aces that came down to us in history were really done by the more skilled artists. It was just some of the court cards that I think particularly the queens were a little clunky looking, Okay. All right, I have these. I have two up, so I'm going to put this one up. And I'm not sure how they were intended to be printed. I have a sheet by Marco. Let me look and see what he has on his sheet. Okay, I don't have it. I thought I might, on the sheet, I thought maybe there would be an appearance of any of the pip cards and how the batons might have been oriented, but I didn't have it. So interestingly, there's a little diamond in the middle of those two that we don't see in this one. But we do see it in the fours. And the sixes. And again, let's imagine that these darks, these blacks will be genuinely black. Remember, I just have a printer's copy. Oh, wonder what happened there. Cards stuck together a little bit. So I am really looking forward to seeing Robby's deck come to life, as he intends it to be. But I think, with the things in mind, like the color of the paper being warmer and also the blacks being blacker, I think we can expect it to hold up very nicely to the Rosenwald decks that we're accustomed to seeing. Okay, and the tens were for all are different because the tens were missing. The tens were all missing. So here, Sullivan Hissman's again has two groups of 5. We have in the Fowler, we have just the additional 2 as vertical, and then here we have 2, one crossing over the other. And now we have the core cards of batons. So here we have the page. Yeah, what a strange leg, huh? A strange leg and foot there. I never noticed how strange that was. The centaurs for the knights across the board. The Queen of Batons had to be recreated because she was completely missing. And again, we have Sullivan Hissman's, refined female face, right? So all of them had to recreate the Queen of Batons. So Sullivan Hissman's gives us 2 options. And Marco and all 3 of them had to just create the queen from scratch. So Marco includes a shield with his Queen of Batons. The other 2, and we have a shield here in Fowler's. I don't think we have a shield in Sullivan Hissman's in either case, unless this, I don't know, is this a shield in the, or is it just part of the, I don't know what that is on the side there. I don't think it's a shield. It looks just like, I don't know what that is on the side there. It could just be confusion with the folds and the furniture or something like that. Okay, we have the kings. But it makes sense, sometimes the king and queen have the same, accoutrements because they're from the same suit. And here we have the last suit coin. We have the rabbit and the hound. I really want to say, when I was going through the deck, the Rosenwald Redux, I really appreciate how he made them not blurry or anything, like, right? Like, you see how this, if it's a facsimile kind of deck, it's kind of like imperfect, right? And we see a little bit of that here too. But I really like how the Redux deck really made it like precise. Like, I really like that a lot. I'm not just being dismissive of the facsimile decks. I think they're beautiful and I appreciate having them that way. But I kind of like seeing it like idealized, you know what I mean? And it's across the board with the coins. How nicely I think they really look. Sorry about that. My husband had to take a phone call, so I hope I didn't cut off anything important. Just my husband's voice travels. There it is again. But you see what I mean about how Fowler handled the coins? He just made them sharper, right? I just kind of like the way they look. You guys almost here. So my husband just gave me some warning that somebody's arriving to the house. But so I apologize for that. My husband hasn't grasped the concept that I need him to be quiet. Hasn't quite grasped that. Okie doke. Trying to get this done before whoever shows up shows up. But we're almost at the end. Oh, what do I have here? Oh, the 10s all had to be done by differently. That's right, all the 10s were missing. So these two guys did the 10s this way. Sullivan, Hissman, and Marco. And then Fowler did it in 2 rows. And there's precedence for both. So who knows? The pages. All a little bit different. So I imagine there, again, must have been damage to, maybe there was damage to this card. To the top portion of the card, maybe. For them all to be different. The Knights. And again, Sullivan Hissman's gives us duplicate queens. The crude queen that came with the book binding and maybe a more refined one that matches some of the other more refined art. And also notice that in both cases, well, the way she appeared in the book binding was this queen with her face, and then with that coin, which doesn't match the rest of the suit. So when Sullivan recreated it to match the queen that probably had this suit, he gave her a more genteel look. And Marco, what he did was he took the original queen, right? He honored the original queen's face, but he gave her the matching coin rather than the coin that probably belonged to another deck. This is why I love comparing cards and comparing decks, because you see the decisions that the deck publishers make. So I hope you enjoyed this side-by-side comparison of the pip cards of the Rosenwald. And the one that I'm showcasing most recently is the Rosenwald Redux, which I'll do more of because I'm going to be comparing Robby's reimaginings of the Minchiati editions that he imagined that the Redux, excuse me, that the Rosenwald probably contained. You know, he thinks it might have been a Minchiati, and so he's supplied us with the additional cards. Now I've gone through Minchiati so many times, I'll probably just show the Minchiati, the addition of the Minchiati cards, you know, rather than going through all the cards of the decks. Until next time, friends, peace, stay well, be brave, and for 2026, show up, speak up, and vote.